Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Maggie Watt, and I have with me Nicholas Coe.
Hello.
And I thought today would be a nice moment to just kind of take a second and talk about some of our favorite things and turn off my volume. There we go. And talk about kind of our favorite things in gaming and things that inspire us and kind of why we all do what we do for this hobby constantly when it's so time consuming and expensive and all this other kind of stuff. But there is such positivity in all of it. So I thought it would be kind of fun to pull that out. And especially for you all in the chat, I would love to hear your favorites as well and kind of get those discussed because there's such a wide breadth in gaming at the moment that I think that it's kind of fun that we all can have different favorites. And there's certainly enough stuff in the world for that to be possible. Nicholas, what do you think of our positivity today?
Sounds great.
Good. I'm glad you're happy about it. Oh man, so I just yesterday actually was having a conversation with someone, and they mentioned because it's the season right before Essen, so it tends to be a little slow on Euro games, and they're chatting like, have you even found any games this year that you liked? And you know, my answer to that is usually that it just gives me time to replay things that I love and maybe not focus so much on constant new games. What do you think of the pre-Essen kind of slump?
It's so like in many ways I'm still working through stuff from last year, so I'm pretty happy at the moment. I mean, I would love shiny new games, sure. But I'm pretty okay just continuing to try out things that didn't make as high on my like estimation of how excited I was about them, or maybe I've had some trouble getting them to the table for whatever reason. So like I still like every year before I go to Spiel, I've made a big list, and this year I think I've played like 20 or 30 of the 40 games that I listed, which is pretty good, but there's still a few more to go.
Yeah, there's these quarterly nights called Sasquatch up here in Seattle, and I went yesterday and we played a bunch of games that I probably wouldn't seek out normally, but because they're just there and they're so accessible, you kind of get them to the table. And it's funny because I was posting photos and people were like, why are you playing like something so kind of outside your norm? I played London Dread and I played some other things. I always find it kind of fun to use opportunities when you have them to just like try stuff that you won't have to purchase and probably none of your friends have. So it's a really cool opportunity to maybe try something outside of it.
Yeah, I like to, especially like cons are a great environment for that because there are lots of people who you don't normally play with, and you can both meet them and try things that they really enjoy and are positive about, which can often help. Like when I tap it about a game, it's harder for me to like introduce it to my group, especially if I feel like they're also going to be tepid about it. It's like I brought you this thing that I'm not at all sure that you'll like, but I hope you do. But at
Right.
cons,
People
it's more
kind of
like yeah, at cons it's more like they're really enthusiastic about this game. Like my experience with Skies at Dice Tower is sort of like that. Skies, in many ways, doesn't sound like something that would be my sort of game, and someone had it and was enthusiastic about it, and I got to try it, and I'm happy I got to try it.
And honestly, enthusiasm makes a mediocre game so much better. Someone teaching you that's really passionate about it, even if you wouldn't like the game, it's still you probably will have a nicer time overall. So let's get on to. So do you keep like favorites in your mind of designers or other types of things, or do you try and just kind of have things you do like and things you don't care for as much?
I focus largely on gameplay. There are designers who more frequently design games that are relevant to my interests, and so I keep an eye on them. Of course, there are designers who I just generally feel do a good job, even if they're not necessarily my interests, or at least they do something really intriguing. Like
Yeah,
there's things I know that I enjoy, and then there's things that like I have no idea if I'm going to like this, but it seems weird and fascinating, and you've pleased me before, so I'll give it a go.
you've pleased me. I like that. Uh, what designers do you follow closely?
I pay most attention, I think, to Stefan Fels, Vital Lacerda, Alexander Pfister, and especially the last year or so. has been really on a roll. I keep an eye on the Winsome games, and beyond that, I guess the Schwatter guys, and I'm not sure who else. Oh, Mark Gertz, if he actually releases something, which I look forward to eagerly.
Well, and I think he's working on trying to get stuff faster next time.
Yeah, I know his latest design has been a real struggle and has gone through several like overhauls and revamps as he tries to get a game that at least he's pleased to publish.
Right, and I think he's a little bit of a perfectionist too, and that can be frustrating on our end user end because it means things are slower and a little bit more careful before they get put out, but it just means a better product overall probably, so it can be good.
Yeah, that's something I appreciate about like Winsome is that they like Winsome games are very hit and miss and hard to get, unfortunately, hard to get information about, even worse. But I at least appreciate that they regularly release things and they're frequently half baked, but you know, sometimes you find gems in them.
So why are you in gaming? Like what really hooked you in and what keeps you coming back for more?
So I got into gaming like largely as like a way to interact with people. I had I still have a lot of trouble with social anxiety, but it used to be much worse. Um, and so I started playing board games with people, and it was like a way for me to actually spend time with my friends and people that I like in a way that I could actually cope with, and even meet new people, which was cool. And I started out with Scrabble mostly. And then I started going to weekly game nights with more recent designer game type stuff. And since then, I've basically been playing more or less weekly for 8 years or so now. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's quite a lot. So do you think just like the number of people that you've met and like the way that you've interacted with people, or is that your primary motivation?
Motivations are complicated. I definitely like the people a lot. I think if I didn't like the community so much, I would find another hobby with a community that I liked. Um, I, I feel like I often come off as someone who isn't that interested in the people because I mostly talk about games. But I do really like the people a lot. I just have a hard time expressing my feelings about people. And yeah, I've had a really good time. The games are like they're a focus for attention that isn't just people, which are something I struggle with, but they're not the goal in and of themselves.
Yeah, so for me, gaming, especially because of how online available gaming community is, it's so much easier for me to interact with people on something like Twitter or BGG and actually, form opinions and say things than it is for me in person. That I found that has been a huge motivator for me to get into gaming, like because the community was available in a way that I could interact properly, which is always super nice.
Yeah.
I find that would keep me coming back, even if I liked games a little less than I do.
Yeah. Being able to interact with people is nice.
Yeah. And it's not every community that's so open to being online. I found that there's a lot of hobbies that they tend to look down on that. And gaming sure has its moments of, social across the table, sit and talk to the real humans, but there's so much of it that's online available and happy to be there that it's encouraging to me because that's how I best communicate with people.
Yeah, the like I've met a fair number of board gaming people via the internet, and I used to meet people via the internet anyway, and I still do. I've gotten to have like some good gaming experiences as a result of that. Like I don't think I would have gotten into playing like train games at all, really. I mean, maybe I would have eventually, but it would take a lot longer, I'm sure, without the help of some people online who encouraged me. And help me get through some of the opacity of those games.
So let's talk a little bit more about kind of that community and kind of where you and I are at, if I'm not mistaken, is that we know a lot of content producers and things like that. Are there any content producers for board games that you follow closely?
I keep an eye on a bunch of people, and I try to listen to stuff that like my friends are producing. I guess I mostly look for, so a lot of board game media is about reviews, and I mostly evaluate games on my own based on my reading of their rule book and maybe some reports or playthroughs if I can find them, because there are a few people who do playthroughs, which I appreciate. But for the most part, like I just want to hear what people think about games when it comes to the media stuff. I do enjoy some of the podcasts that are more chats and discussions, I guess, like this. But a lot of them tend to be very long, and I've never been very good at keeping up with those as like a regular listener.
I mean, but that's okay. I thought you could even name some names if you have a couple favorites or folks that you.
So like I still enjoy watching Router's run-throughs, although I've been watching a few of them lately. Mealy, whenever he puts a video up, I make sure I watch that. I always appreciate Zen's videos. Of course, now he's part of People's Included, so that's great. And I'm trying to think of other people, and I'm failing to think of names, unfortunately.
That's all right. Well, and let's talk about Zen, because Zen was kind of one of those people that, though I don't know him very well, Zen is incredibly like kind, and he just like immediately brings you in and kind of builds you as part of his community. It's a really special. And so for his video stuff, I was so happy when he started doing gameplay and review of games that you couldn't find in the States that were Japanese only for the most part. And I found them so fascinating. I was really, really grateful for him to do that. And then some of those titles you see like leaking over into the United States, getting picked up by other companies. Now things are moving a little bit more toward the Japanese market. But I found that he's doing something that really no one else is doing, which is cool and rare.
Yeah, I always appreciate people who are talking about things that no one else is. Like at this point, there's so many games being designed and produced that it's hard to keep a track on like a significant portion of them. Like even just ones that like I try to go through the spiel list, but even that list is getting too big for me to go through now. And I particularly like it when, I guess it's not just that Zen is covering like interesting stuff, but he does it in a very pleasant way.
It's pleasant is the best word to describe all things that are Zen. And his name is so appropriate to him in every way. I have now had the pleasure of meeting him in person as well, which is a huge, huge benefit of him having some family out here in Seattle. So I got to kind of host him around a little bit when he came out to say hi. And that was a lot of fun. He's an amazing game teacher. And I think that that's a rare quality for people to be able to teach me a game well without me getting confused or frustrated. Like everything made sense and was placed in such a way that I understood. It's inspiring.
Yeah. I was very happy. I think I taught him Nippon at BGG Con, and that was a blast.
So in that sense, I also tend to find the people in board game media that I like. Like Rado, I could watch Rado do anything. I don't necessarily watch videos to decide if I'm going to like a thing. I think at some point, once you've played enough games, you kind of know things that you're typically going to like or dislike based on how the mechanics work, or if you're a theme person, probably that enhances your opinion. But I tend to watch Rado's final thoughts instead of his run-throughs, because I find where he comes from and how he comes up with his opinions of things to be really, really interesting. Rado is definitely one of the nicer people that I know online, so I can appreciate most of what he says comes from a place of wanting to be as nice as possible, and him and his wife kind of out in this little bubble that they've built of just gaming and being nice to each other. And I think it's really a wonderful thing. I maybe am a little bit more of a conflict player than they are, so I don't really get to use their recommendations as mine, but it's still neat that they have such a style, and like they've kind of defined that as calling themselves Care Bears. No one else was really doing that, and I find that to be really funny.
Yeah, there's a lot of people whose taste I don't really align with well at all. But I really appreciate people who tell me why they like a game. I see a lot, like the reviews that I tend to not pay so much attention to tell me about that the game is fun and it has nice pieces, but I can see that you enjoyed the game. You told me that you enjoyed it. And I can see that has nice pieces. But if you could tell me, like, what is it that actually makes it fun for you? Is it that you're, is it something about building this particular type of engine? Is it the theme? Is it the interactions that you get to have with people via this game? That sort of stuff I really enjoy a lot.
Well, we're quickly running into kind of a period now. The game reviews and reviewers and stuff, it's all cyclical. Like things change a lot, but I think we're getting to a point now where we're really expecting people to not just give a score out of 10, but really give reasons behind things so that you can kind of judge motivation. If an interaction is fun for you because you didn't have to mess with anyone else's engine and you still got to build your own, like making that known is more important to me than just saying you like the engine building in a game. And so I do find that there's a more of a clamoring for that type of critique, and this is higher level stuff than I think a lot of reviews had to be before, where people didn't have quite as easy access to the games, and they certainly didn't have access to seeing everything the way that we do with Dice Tower and all those guys just showing off all of the games all the time. Now you really want people to be able to dig down and make it understood what about the game was appealing and why. And I think there's a fair amount of people that do that well in writing, but I don't know that a lot of people do video review with a lot of that yet. Maybe.
Yeah, I generally agree that it's more prevalent, and I think in general writing tends to leave video production by a bit, for whatever reason. And I'm definitely very appreciative. I'm also acutely aware that I spend a lot of time critiquing film in particular, so I'm used to media analysis, and it feels weird seeing reviews that don't talk about, I guess, deeper themes or topics. Yeah, there's been a lot of surface coverage. I'm happy that there's starting to be more. I think there's more coverage in general, and partially as a side effect of that, there's more stuff that digs below the surface.
Yeah, I could agree with that. So going on, what are your favorite gaming events, and what do you prioritize over other things? I know that you go to a fair amount of conventions, but is that because that's where all the games are, or is it because they have something else to them that attracts you?
Well, I go to a lot of conventions because I live in New York City, which has a lot of people, but actually finding people to play games with, and particular games I enjoy in a venue that works, it has been really hard. And so conventions have been a good way for me to get time and space and people to play games with. The ones that I like the most are the open gaming, or they're not necessarily exclusively open, unscheduled gaming. You play whatever you like with whoever you like. But that's certainly the focus I prefer. So I really like BGG Con and Dice Tower Con for that reason. Even though I actually tend to schedule at least a few games at those events, because there are longer games that I want to prearrange. They're if I'm going to play a 4-hour game, I want to make sure that people are actually interested in playing it for 4 hours, or at least have more confidence that they'll be interested.
Yeah, I tend to not schedule any games, but I do run into a fair amount of the longer stuff just I think at this point people know that I like them, so I can dredge up more interest. But the open gaming cons are definitely more worthwhile overall. Just if I can sit down and just play games and run into people all day, I find that I spent my money in a way that I'm much more proud than something like Gen Con, where the typical focus is more on purchasing and trade show and exhibitor hall.
Yeah, like I go to Spiel, and I still go to Spiel, but I go there mostly to try and buy things that are very hard to get otherwise, and that's what I really focus on, rather than stuff that's going to be coming over the States anyway. And I think a good chunk of why I still go to that event is also because it's kind of an excuse for me to spend time in Europe, or excuse isn't the right word. It provides a focus for me to spend time in Europe. Like, I can go somewhere else and like piddle around for a few days and then go to this big event with tons of people and lots of games.
What's your side trip this year?
This year, I'm going to Brussels with I for a few days beforehand. And we're going to poke at museums and food and see the city and stuff. I'm a little nervous because like I've been studying German so that I would be less disoriented when I'm in Germany. And now I'm going to Belgium, which German is not really a big thing there. And like I assume people will speak English fairly well, just like a lot of places, fortunately.
Yeah, it's awful, but when you go to Europe, you can kind of rely on a good chunk of people already speaking English.
Yeah, it's nevertheless really disorienting to have no idea what a lot of the signs mean. Just basic things like being able to locate the restroom efficiently and things like that.
So moving on to actual game bits, because I really like game bits. They're one of my favorite things. Do you have any like tactile things about games that you really love, like nice cards or inserts or those types of things?
Let me think about it, and you can talk a little bit about things that you like a lot.
I think we all have kind of a Jones at this point, and I know that there's a kind of a rehashing of a lot of this. I really like mechanically strange bits in games. There was a game I played when I was younger called Lie Detector, and you put these little cards in, and you poked through with a pin, and it would tell you, like, it was a deduction game, and you were trying to figure out who was lying. And it itself was a really weird mechanical piece. You saw something like in Camel Up, that weird pyramid where you put the dice in and you kind of release one at a time. I thought that was a neat idea. And we've all gotten so used to understanding the finances behind printing a game, knowing how a Kickstarter works and how many cards are on a card sheet and how expensive 4mm chipboard is. It's strange that we all tend to have some knowledge in these areas, but I think it's making it where the efficiency of making the cheapest game possible is taking away from these really cool out there bits that you can design in a game. So I think every time a game comes out with one of those, it's going to do slightly better than it would have, despite if the game is not great or not perfectly well done. I think those really flashy bits that do something are going to sell a game these days. To come by because of the way that Kickstarter and crowdfunding and everything has kind of taught us to break everything down into the most efficient way possible and get it funded and get it out onto the market.
Yeah, I'm really struggling as someone who doesn't care much about components themselves in general. But I do appreciate when components facilitate something new and different. Like, I still think that the gears in Zulkin are a really cool device to facilitate that kind of, I guess, in some sense, time banking of your workers. That would be really tedious to do.
I thought it was lovely.
Yeah, and although the pyramid in Camel Up doesn't facilitate anything particularly new, they could have given you a bag with dice in it and told you pull out one die at random and roll it, and it would have worked. But the pyramid really does add a lot to the experience, I think.
I mean, and I think when it comes to those lighter kind of more, I'm going to put this in quotes, fun games, but something like Colt Express having the big 3D cardboard train was an interesting choice, and that made the game, it adds something to that value, because the gameplay itself for me was not that inspiring, but I thought it was just a really beautiful game that jumps off the table. Oh, Seb. I will say that, oh my gosh, sorry, I'm getting comments, but I will say components don't necessarily make a game for me, but I do appreciate what they've been trying to do with them and make them more interesting or more different than normal.
Yeah, I think the game that most recently excited me in terms of components is Prospectus. With its like, I like the notion of a cube tower type thing, but one of the things I found mildly off-putting about Wallenstein is that it also added a memory element in that case, because it was made of cardboard and you can see what cubes were trapped in there. But with Prospectus, it's clear, and it also looks super cool, which always helps.
It does look really cool, but it was just a cube tower. That was my disappointing factor, was that they created something, but it ended up being just kind of a normal cube tower. And so it seemed like a lot of bother for not a lot of payoff. I guess the clear top was interesting, because then you could know what colors hadn't fallen out yet. But I literally just played Prospectus yesterday for the first time, finally. And I was glad to have the cube tower, but it was so giant and so over the top that the box was even like big because of it.
Mm-hmm.
I almost thought that component took away from the game.
Yeah, I haven't actually played the game yet, but I can see that. I do agree that it seems gratuitously large.
It's ginormous.
I guess I don't so much mind overly big pieces as much as like there's a point where it's so big it gets in the way. And like I definitely see this with like a lot of the big box games. As someone who, between traveling to cons and living in New York City and like going and carrying my games in bags pretty much everywhere, like some of these really like, like Fresco big box or even Terra Mystica big box starts to get really unwieldy and hard for me to actually take places. So I do appreciate more compact things. I guess in small, simple things, I also like games where you just, like as a small component thing, I like sliding things around. Like the Power Bowls and Terra Mystica have a little bit of that, but I'm thinking of like Frog Island has the line of ships, and you just like push them forward a little bit and then pick the one off the end and put it at the front again. And Coal Baron or Glukal has this totally unnecessary but very fun little coal elevator thing that you slide up and down, you put cubes into, and then back out of was cute.
There's a company called Mind Twister Games, and they make abstracts for the most part, but they always have interesting bits in their games. I really, really like that. They had a lily pad game with these little rubbery lily pads. They had Rapello, which is one of my favorite abstracts, and it has this cool disc delivery plunger thing. And I don't know like who designed it or who made it, but it's just such a fun way of putting the little discs out on the board. And it was completely unnecessary. Again, you could just set discs out, but it was just a lot of fun, and it added a lot to the game. The most recent one I picked up was 7-Card Samurai, which I think the only bit in there that's really unique is the art. They did a really good job of that.
Yeah, I know Haru Ichiban from I guess a year and a bit ago. Like the edition that they did with the wooden pieces was aesthetically very nice to play with. So it had like this wooden box that sort of it both formed the board, but it was also the container. So you would basically sort of slide the two pieces apart, and then the indented area that formed the like walls of the box would become the playboard, and then the edges of the box were like little player area things that were really pleasant.
Yeah, I'm enjoying a couple of the games that use the box as a component. Resistor did something similar to that, and the upcoming Heroes and Tricks looks pretty neat. I like the idea that the whole piece is being used. Ice Cool, which is coming out, like that has a pretty neat pieces of the box become components in the game, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think Cleopatra and Society of the Architects was the game that introduced me to the concept, because there you put the walls around the side of the box and they would touch tiles sitting on top of the box. And that game also just has like some really nice plastic pieces for like the obelisks and everything.
Oh, Brad's so on it. So Stonemaier, when they first made the Euphoria, like the pretty Euphoria that came out with the Kickstarter with the little like metal coins and the things that felt like stone, that was so cool. Such an a great idea. Maybe it would have been kind of cool to like actually just cut up some brick and stuff and put those in a box, but they probably wouldn't have made as much sense and would have been messier. It was a beautiful board as well. I like the little clear discs and things, and you kind of push them along the river.
Mm-hmm.
So going along those lines, even a step further, because there's one thing in gaming I don't do a lot of. Do you do organizers a lot, or do you tend to just? I think I already know the answer, but do you tend to just place things in kind of most efficient boxes?
I tend to just use baggies a lot, mostly. Like there are some games that I've actually continued to enjoy enough that I know that I'm going to keep them, but for the most part, like I just try games a few times. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to invest in, I don't know, like, well, particularly the game-specific organizers. I know some companies are making and that are super nice. I did get one for Fields of Arla because the setup for that game is kind of enormous if you're just opening lots of bags and trying to put them on the board. And because it's, as a side effect of it being a two-player game, there are fewer people to help with setting up the board, which is something I did not foresee at all when I bought the game.
I literally have one of those inserts, and it's for Caverna, because it's the same exact reason. It's just such a bear to set up, and it takes forever. And the I think it was a broken token. The insert made it so much easier. But I tend to not buy those inserts because I find baggies or little plastic cups or whatever to be sufficient. I think something coming along like Meeple Realty has such beautiful inserts, but I don't know how realistic or necessary they are. I haven't figured out if I need one yet.
Yeah, I think I know that they did one for Arkwright with the little, I think it's like 70 pawns in that game that you lay out.
Yeah.
It's another game where the setup is kind of absurd. Although, like, I sort of have a system now for laying out the pawns really quickly by hand. But I'm sure it would be very lovely to just like open the box and lift it up and set it on the board and be done with it, and also not worry about people knocking them over.
I haven't had much trouble with that, but I also, the Meeple Realty insert has these like really beautifully cut accordion pieces of wood and stuff like that. They're gorgeous. There's a lot of gluing and sanding and stuff like that I'm just not typically going to do.
You know, less of a crafts project.
No, I have games budgets. That's what I do. Actually, the chat has reminded me one of the finest pieces of game mechanics that I can remember is Perfection when I was little. Because that was actually a mechanical piece that would pop up all your pieces at you. It wasn't batteries or anything, so they actually still make that as a mechanical piece to this day. Mm-hmm. I thought that was an interesting one.
Yeah, that is neat. This reminds me of like some electronic bits that I like. I've always liked the idea of game clocks. One of the things I wanted to design, and I've never actually taken the time to build it, is a multiplayer like chess clock thing.
Okay.
You can play like a 4-player game with like 30 minutes for the game. Yeah.
I get stressed out with game clocks for things like chess, something where I want to think as much as I can, but I don't mind clocks in other games, I guess.
Yeah, I don't. Well, so sometimes I do actually want to see how well I can play at on a tighter timer. But I also find them helpful sometimes. Like I am a person who can spend like hours considering a single move, and I will do that in like asynchronous online play. So I find timers and clocks helpful for managing that. In practice, what I usually do is I just try to spend in more than a couple of minutes thinking about my turn. Every now and then I'll let myself like stop and actually think for like 5 minutes about a move. Especially in like ATXX, like there are points in the game where I need to stop and think really hard.
I think we all have that moment. I usually just warn people. I'm like, hey guys, I know I've been taking quick moves, but right now I'm gonna think. Like, I give everyone kind of a chance to take a break and go get a water. I don't think I'm high AP, but I do like to just, especially on those big turns that you really want to do something special, I like to make sure I don't miss stuff.
Yeah, I think I'm also fond of timers because I've played online a fair amount, and it's enormously helpful as sort of a negotiation tool to like communicate what your expectations are for how quickly the other person will play. Like, are you expecting a move a day, a move every few hours? If you're playing like a real-time thing on like Board Game Arena used to be purely real-time. And some people want you to make moves like in seconds. And it's enormously helpful to know, like, are you expecting the person to take a minute, or do you want them to take only 30 seconds or 5 minutes or whatever?
What are your favorite games to play online?
Well, I want to mention that a small thing that Board Game Arena added, which I really appreciate, is they have a button that you can press that just sends the message like, I'd like to think for a minute, which I find very helpful. I guess the related-ish thing is not knowing it's your turn, which happens to me sometimes. I know. I'm like, oh, you're waiting for me. I could have made my turn 5 minutes ago. Sorry.
I have that trouble in Yucatan, especially, but
yeah. Online, I don't think I have anything I've been playing much. I've mostly just been playing games I enjoy. There's a few games I will basically only play online. Like Seasons is a prime example. Like I can play a 2-player game of Seasons online in like 20 minutes. And the like getting all the bits out of the box and setting up the boards and getting the deck shuffled and everything usually, it's not a lot of time, but still, like if you're talking a 20-minute game and you're spending an additional 5 minutes just setting things up and putting them away, that is like a significant amount of overhead. I mostly like to play games with, like lately I've primarily been playing games with people who I know in some capacity via Twitter or Instagram or whatever. And I would like to play a game with them, but we are not actually physically near each other for a while. And so I've done that. And I guess the other thing is some of the ATXX games I actually don't want to play the longer ones online, but some of the shorter ones I can actually finish up a game within a month. I'm usually pretty okay with, as long as moves are still occurring regularly. If I can make a move or two a day, I'm fine. If the delays become longer than that, then I start to forget what the heck is going on.
That makes sense. Do you have any questions for me?
I was interested in like your top designer, or like designers that you like to pay attention to.
It's hard for me because I think so many designers at this point are my friends. I'd recategorize them as the people I follow maybe because of their design, but their design is what maybe introduced us and got us talking in a way. Someone I really, really admire is Daniel Solis. I think he's just got this crazy brain that is constantly trying to gamify things and make things into clever twists on mechanisms. And I always find that he's got something interesting, up his sleeve. But it's hard because, I think there's just so many amazing designers, and so many gamers are also designers.
Yeah, I can say that.
But so easily Steffenfeld is like the quickest example of a designer that the gaming was for me. the way that he puts mechanisms together. Batala coming out of nowhere with like the game is as nuanced and crazy as he can make them. I think that that's pretty powerful and important. And then I see people that make games that I don't necessarily love, like Eric Lang makes a lot of board games that are interesting and mechanically different, just not usually up my alley, not usually high strategy, but I think that that's interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree that there's like there are a number of people who I like to watch, and Eric is among them, and Daniel too, for that matter, who design things that are not games I'm going to play a lot, or even at all necessarily, but I appreciate that they exist and they seem like cool ideas.
Or he's asking if we didn't have a topic. I'm like, well, probably not really a topic this morning. Right before Gen Con, we had kind of a explosive week and people were really upset and angry about things. And then Gen Con was kind of a blur. And so this week I just wanted something nice and let's talk about things we do like in games and the reason that we're all here, because I think that gets lost sometimes. It's so easy to critique and focus on the negative that it's nice sometimes just to be nice. I thought it would be fun today. And Nicholas helped me. They built me a list of topics that could be fun to talk about that were just solely positive, and I kind of lumped them all together for today. But I appreciate you all hanging out and chatting with us. If you have questions, please post them in the chat. I just wanted something to talk about that was good today, because I love gaming, and it sometimes gets lost a little bit when you're fighting for representation and diversity and all this other stuff, and you really, really want your gaming hobby to be all that it could be, that I think it comes off as exclusively negative at times, and I hate that. So,
well, I think there's a big difference between like actual negativity and critique. They come from very different places. Like critique is like, I mean, they're both potentially draining and upsetting and that sort of thing. And I really appreciate critique a lot, but it is tiring, and sometimes it's nice to just talk about things that are fun. I know one of the things I want to chat about is like games that pleasantly surprise you, like you weren't expecting to like it. Like there was something that you thought was going to annoy you a bunch and it actually turned out to be fine, and you love the game or whatever. The couple that I can think of are Dimension was one, like a game where you're like just trying to satisfy constraints on a timer. Sounded like unpleasant to me, but I've actually had a ball with it. I think in Ponzi Scheme, even though I picked up a bunch of copies for people,
thank you.
I wasn't sure if the game was actually going to be that great, and it's actually wonderful.
I think my most pleasant surprise for a game, probably, like, just if you had told me I would like it on the description alone, I wouldn't have believed you, and it's Morta Morosa. I don't know if you all know this. It's like a big tower, and you drop cubes in, and you try and hear which level they land on. And I don't know why. It's just such a goofy little thing, and it's just delightful is the word. It has very few rules and very few other things going on, and it's just a pleasure to play. It's a Gosu kind of falls in that territory because it's so swingy and crazy, but I like my goblin killing game. I don't know. It's tough because I think I like a good fair amount of everything, but maybe I don't. I guess Mystic Veil was the recent one that everyone seems to be real down on it now, but I like it. I think it's as fun as it was to learn Ascension or Dominion. Like I found it to be as fun as either of those. But
yeah,
pleasantly surprised. It's hard because you want to evaluate things for what they are, not make everything into the one category of games that you really like. So you kind of have to take things as they're trying to be and see if that works for you.
Yeah, definitely. Like I know I could be a real grump about randomness in games, but I still enjoy, like Seasons is about as random as it gets. Outside of something, I guess, like Risk is in some of those other games that rely a lot on like you just roll the dice and see what happens type stuff. So I do try things that are like close to things that I might like and see how they go.
Beth asked if there was a really fantastic gaming experience you've had. Just recently at Gen Con was kind of nice. I demoed for Czech Games, and the second game we were in was a really fast game in between the two scheduled demos that we had. And the three people that sat down, we had just this really raucous hour 20-minute long Prodigals Club. And once we were all done with it, I found out that two of the other people that were at the table had worked at game stores and were like kind of in the same position I was as far as buying and teaching games to friends of theirs. And one of them had seen some videos and stuff and just didn't want to say anything till it was all over. And it was just a really like awesome, pleasant experience. And it was just like, it shows you all of the good that can happen at like random con demos. Do you have any fantastic gaming experiences recently?
I think like my top experiences are largely playing like meeting people over games and connecting with people over games. Like I met you over Five Tribes, or at least I felt like that was the first time. Like I mean, think we talked before, but Five Tribes is like an extended like thing.
That like random Sunday at Gen Con, like that Five Tribes kind of cemented us as friends, I think.
Right, and I was really happy at BGG Con that I got to sit down and play Nippon with Zen, and like when I was in San Francisco, I got to play Finca with Netters and stuff like that. Are the highlights. I don't. It's hard to pick one. I guess other moments that I sometimes like to recall are like sometimes I'm really satisfied with what I managed to accomplish in a game or something like that. I did it. I made the thing work somehow. Sometimes that even means winning, but like I know at Con of the North a couple years ago, I played the Stouffer Dynasty at like the start of the con, and I was really tired. And I'd sort of forgotten the focus of the game, and I did really badly. And then I played it as like my last game of the con, and I like remembered how to play the game, and I did all the things I wanted to do. That was really pleasant.
Yeah, my first time making ships work in Nippon felt pretty good. Because at some point when you're teaching a game that you've played too often, you try and just go for a goofier strategy than you normally would. And that's always a nice moment when you just kind of like make the things go together that probably shouldn't. He asks if we have go-to games that make us feel good. Mine is easily cribbage. It's just one of those games I can play anywhere, anytime, with anyone, and probably do okay. It just play something 1,000 times, and it's going to feel pretty familiar and comfortable to play it again. Do you have one of those?
Yeah, I feel that way about Scrabble when I have people to play Scrabble with. Like I'm in a weird-ish place with Scrabble where I know it well enough that, like, I guess I've played it, probably over 100 times at least. And so I know a bunch of things that people who have not played it nearly that much don't know. But I'm not at the level of like people who play it regularly all the time and have for years. Or even people who just play it regularly and have for a few months, frankly, because practicing in a short time span is always super helpful in developing a skill. And I also really like, I have more of a rotation of like small puzzle games that I enjoy. For a number of years, like playing Pandemic solo was like one of my go-to like relaxing puzzle experiences. More recently, that's been Limes, I think.
Oh, I love Limes. It's so fun. So I think it's Brad. Brad is asking, because it's a couple weeks after Gen Con. It's I think a week after Gen Con. I have zero sense of time right now. Are there any games that kind of stood out this part of the season before Essen for you or for me? I don't know that I have anything except for Sakura Arms that's really like jumped out at me. I've played Vast a couple of times now, and I think it's a beautiful hot mess. and I don't know that it'll stay in my collection for very long, but it was fun to learn. And I have robots to kind of poke around with and a couple other games, but Sakura Arms is definitely the game I think will stick around my collection the longest. And if I can get paste ups in English for 12 euros, it will likely be around, but I need to get those in English, and they still haven't gotten back to me.
Yeah, paste ups are important. Like I've tried to teach games without paste up, and even like Emotep is hard. Even if there's not much text in that game, it's still enough to make it hard for people.
Well, this one has English rules, but no English on the cards or the abilities. So,
right, yeah, that's tough. My copy of Kashgar has been in that state for a while. In terms of stuff that like I'm excited about after Gen Con, I guess there are a number of things that like I'm vaguely interested in looking into more. But most of my attention is on Spiel releases, and information is just starting to trickle out in greater quantities for those. Like I'm starting to see renderings of components, a couple of rule books, but not very many yet.
Oracle Delphi got a really beautiful online photo the other day, so pretty excited about that.
The same person I think did the rendering for Great Western Trail, and I both really liked the rendering, and I also thought it was really cool that they posted the wireframes of the bits on BGG.
I thought it was pretty neat as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I love seeing process type stuff. Total tangent. Piper Thibodeau, who does like daily paintings. I have no idea how she manages to crank out like paintings of characters every day and do other stuff. But she does, and she also, if you support on Patreon, she'll post like her in-progress sketches as she cleans up her work, and that's really cool to see. Similarly, I actually like seeing that a lot in board game design, although there's not a whole lot that's been exposed traditionally. Some of the designer diaries on BGG and stuff like that are really cool.
Well, I've been here and there seeing Daniel Solis. He Twitch streams sometimes when he's doing graphic design, which I always find is fascinating to me because I'm not a graphic designer, so I'd rather just learn about it from someone who is. I find that to be really cool, and the companies that allow him to show off their product before they're necessarily like ready to go to market, I like seeing the progress. And honestly, I probably wouldn't have cared about Chimera Station as much as I am now if I hadn't watched him doing the book for it.
Yeah,
and it's I almost got a demo of Chimera Station. If I could have just found Adam McIver out at Gen Con, I probably could have gotten a demo, but I'm disappointed.
Yeah, I like Chimera Station is a game that wasn't really on my radar, but seeing all the in-progress photos has me like kind of excited about it. Other stuff. In terms of like other games I can think of offhand that I'm interested in, it's largely stuff that I've been monitoring for a while because I try to pay attention to some publishers and designers who I know have produced things I've liked in the past and see what they're coming out with in the future. So the things I can think of are like Great Western Trail, which is another collaboration between Alexander Pfister and Eggert Spiele. I am really excited about Jorvik as a re-theme of the Speicherstadt.
I think Solarius Mission is pretty high on my list, and the reprint of Indonesia.
Solarius Mission is very high on my list of like things that I'm fascinated to try, and I have no idea if I will actually like the game just based on my current understanding. I haven't read the rulebook yet, unfortunately. Let's see what was in. I guess Oracle of Delphi, of course. And I'm also coming out in the near future, I think, is North American Railways from Spielworks. And that sounds like a bizarre drafting stockholding game. And what more could I ask for?
Or they're going to be fine. I want them both. I'm probably just going to wrap up this chat. I appreciate you guys kind of hanging out for our lower key chat today. I just was, like I said, it was just a little bit much after so much people up in the air and everything so angry last couple weeks. I was just wanting something nice, and this was very, very nice and pleasant. So I appreciate you all being here. Nicholas, do you have any last minute stuff to cover?
Not that I can think of right now. I'm trying to remember things in family.
Well, I appreciate you being here and hanging out with me for a bit. I'm going to hopefully edit some videos today, so I should have stuff coming out in either today or tomorrow, and hopefully for the rest of August. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm hoping to actually shoot some videos. I've been struggling a bit with videos I'm working on, and I finally got an outline, I think, mostly done. So fingers crossed.
Outlines? Who needs outlines? Oh,
I do. I need outlines badly.
I appreciate y'all being here, and I will chat with you very soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.